right now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for you today. So Dr. Bertram Gallant is an internationally recognized expert in academic integrity and ethics in higher education. In her work, she leads innovative efforts to cultivate integrity-centered learning environments and assessment practices. She's advised universities, policymakers, and global organizations on fostering cultures of honesty and accountability in the face of emerging technologies such as generative AI. She takes research-driven, solution-oriented approaches and brings insight, clarity, and a touch of humor to complex conversations about academic integrity, learning, and AI's role in education. So wish her a warm welcome, and then I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass it along to her to get us started.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Let me share my screen. All right, I presume you're seeing the correct screen, which is my presentation. All right, well, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Jason, for inviting me to talk at your brown bag session. I used to have a picture of our book on the title slide, but recently someone posted that I think it was NC State, their book club had a cake made for their last book club discussion. So I've replaced that is not the cover of our book. I've replaced the cover of our book with that cake because I just think that's hilarious and really funny. And sorry, the date on there is wrong. It's not March 14th. It is March 20th, in case you were wondering what time zone I am in. I am in your time. I'm in March 20th time zone, anyways, not March 14th. So thank you, everyone. Let's start off with you just putting in the chat, how do you currently feel today at this moment about the impact of Gen AI on teaching and learning? Choose a goat that represents, you can interpret that goat whatever way you like, and put in the chat what number represents your feelings. So we've got 4, 7, 5, 4. So a few sevens, a few fours, some eights. And then if you want to explain what you and how you interpret that goat face, go for it. Quite a number, quite a few eights. A 9. Definitely want to hear the 9 interpretation. 6, Lindsay, I don't know if this is why you chose it. I've had people say, because I know I need friends and colleagues and people to support me through this. There's no one's, very few of you. One, let's see, Pam Barber choosing 3. That's most of the time what I feel like. Megan's not quite sure yet. Oh, Marianne's excited. Good for you. I'd be curious, Marianne, what you actually teach. Excited but slightly terrified. I think that's probably realistic. I'm gonna try and look over the fence. I was making a joke. I gave a talk on Saturday, and M. Gabriella chose 1. I said I think 1 is me biting the what do you call it? Basically the wires that connect us to the internet, that I just want to bite them off and stop everything from happening sometimes. I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is really challenging times, right? And that we have feelings, we're human. And we should acknowledge those feelings and deal with them. I vacillate between all 9 of these depending on the moment. Usually when I'm working with Claude, I'm feeling like 9 because I'm getting it to do things for me that I have never been good at, like creating an infographic. I've just never been a visual person creating flyers. So that's been really great. But my general state of mind is as a hopeful pessimist. So what does that mean? It means I'm pessimistic about the companies. I'm pessimistic about the leaders, and I'm pessimistic about our ability to shoehorn a general purpose technology that was not created for education, was not created for teaching, learning, assessment. So I'm skeptical and pessimistic about our ability to shoehorn that in to what we do and to have it match with learning science when it was designed with the exact opposite science in mind. It was designed not to help students deal with friction, but to automate, to take friction totally away. It wasn't designed to help students through the struggle. It was designed to automate so that we don't have to struggle. So I'm pessimistic that those particular chatbots which is what everybody's talking about, are a good fit for the teaching and learning environment. I'm hopeful because I'm seeing some great um, innovations by individual faculty, by some companies that are trying to make products specifically for education. I'm hopeful because of Gen Alpha. I think that they are becoming of an ethical age. They see the problems with it. They're putting their devices away. They're understanding the impact of negative impacts of social media. And they seem a little bit more aware and more interested in human to human interaction. So that they make me hopeful. There's a great organization called Young Futures, and they're funding students who are doing things with AI. And one of the best projects that I've heard about them doing was they created an app. So I called Look Up, and if all you and all your friends install it on your phones will know when you're in physical proximity to each other. And if you're looking at your phone, the app will flash Look Up, and encourage students to put their phone down and engage with the people that are in their vicinity. So I love that. Okay, so that's where I am. Depending on the minute of the day, I might be more pessimistic than hopeful. I am starting off with what may seem like a pessimistic side, but really it's the critical thinking side. Like what do we have to know about what's happening right now? And before we can get there, I want to remind us of our purpose. Um, we often talk as faculty, we often talk about we're here to help students learn. I'm an educator, but the truth is we're in the business of not only developing student knowledge and abilities, but certifying it. Validate that they've actually mastered the learning outcomes to some level, maybe C, B, A, or that they haven't. And then our institutions collate all of those validations and they issue a diploma or degree. And society depends on us. This is contract we've had with society for 100, 100, 200 years to develop and certify the next generation of citizens and professionals. And I think it's really important for us to remember that because we often kind of throw that responsibility of validating out with the bathwater if it gets too complicated. So what does that mean? There's a lot of things we have to do. I call it our moral obligation supply chain. Faculty have to first figure out what the learning outcomes are or be told what they are, depending on the situation, and then design fair and honest a pedagogy to help students master those learning outcomes, and then fair and honest assessments to measure whether students, to what extent students have met those learning outcomes, right? And then students, in doing those assessments, have to fairly and honestly demonstrate their learning, not their ability to look something up in ChatGPT necessarily and copy and paste it, but their actual ability to think and know the material. Then teachers have to fairly and honestly assess the level to which the students have mastered that learning outcome. Only then, when that happens in every class, because we're on a credit hour system, whether we like it or not, can the institution certify student knowledge and ability. So if anything goes wrong in this supply chain, if teachers don't fairly and honestly design things, students cheat, teachers don't fairly and honestly assess student learning, then the institution can't certify their knowledge. And our degrees and diplomas lose value, and we lose the trust of society, which we've already seen was happening before AI came along. So this is our purpose. And then in what context are we operating? Well, in 2008, in my first book, I said we're still teaching as if it's the 20th century and the internet doesn't exist. We were still acting in 2008 when I wrote that first book that we were the holders of all knowledge and information like we used to be before the internet. And that wasn't true then, and it's not true now. And yet I feel like we are still in that mindset as a system, as an higher education system. But we know that the context has changed, right? Internet democratized access to information and learning. Unfortunately, social media and now chatbots are increasingly replacing human to human interactions. Obviously, with these chatbots, they can mimic real human effort, thought, and output. So we don't know if we're validating the student learning or the student's ability to generate output with a chatbot. We are marketed for technological fixes like the Google Classroom for K through 12 and all these learning management systems. We're just constantly being inundated with, I have the technological solution to fix your problems. Emergency remote teaching during the pandemic exposed a lot of our vulnerabilities. And I would argue that demand for access, convenience, and ease has taken precedence over learning facilitation and validation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's our context. Now, let's turn our focus to our students trying to get educated in the age of AI. So I met with this student who had taken one of her, for an in-person class, had taken her final exam at home on Canvas, just like she was supposed to. And she used ChatGPT and she got reported for cheating. And so she admitted it right away. And we were sitting in my office and she said, I have four classes in my major this quarter. All four of them are in-person classes, yet all of them are doing remote assessments, Canvas-based assessments on my own computer in my bedroom. She said, "Can I please take my tests in your testing center? Because I don't think I can resist the temptation to cheat." And when I first started my job way back in 2006, I used to say, we want to graduate, we want our graduates to choose the right thing even when no one's watching. And I still believe that teaching folks how to be ethical citizens and professionals is a moral obligation on our part. And now, though, I also feel like it's an obligation on our part to help them deal with the current reality by giving them opportunities to be away from all of these devices and just tell us what they know and what they can do, and not expect them to be superhuman. If you think about your own life and any time you've had a goal for something, whether it was to lose weight or get healthy or make some kind of habit change, you needed help. You couldn't do that on your own. Maybe you had an accountability buddy, or maybe you had a fitness coach or nutrition coach or something. Because even though you had a goal, it was really hard to act in accordance to that goal all the time. And yet we expect students to resist these temptations, even in high stakes situations. And I think that is a dereliction of our duty. Let me show you what they're going through right now. So even if they don't want to use AI, they Google something just like they always have. There's the AI overview, right? They weren't even intending to not read the sources, but geez, there's a summary right there. Why would I click on the source and go read it when it gave me a summary? It's the new form of Cliff Notes and Sparks Notes. I can install things right in my LMS to have AI answer my questions for me. If I use Grammarly, which I've been using from middle school because I was taught to use it by my K through 12 teachers, it is now full of AI rewrites, writes, and AI suggestions. And speaking for Grammarly, or not for Grammarly, speaking of Grammarly, I'm missing my video here, but they do you know about their predicting grade function? They recently got in trouble for pretending that they had experts reviewing people's writings. So they got sued, they got called out because they would say, famous people, here's what Kara Swisher would say about your writing, which was not true. They were using their names. They're also using your names. So a student can submit a paper or have Grammarly write their paper for them, give Professor Trombley's rubric and assignment instructions and syllabus, and then Grammarly will go off on the internet and look up ratemyprofessor.com or other places for information about Jeff Trombley. And then they'll come back to the student and say, this is the grade Professor Trombley is going to give you on this assignment. This is the feedback he's going to give you. This is what we can do to make changes so that you get an A instead of the B minus that we know he's going to give you. How rude. So no matter what we do in the classroom, we're really trying to get students to raise their intrinsic motivation and care about learning and work through the struggle. And that tool that they've been using for their entire life is telling them, don't worry about any of that. Just make sure you have a perfect product that will get an A. They're so confident about this now that they've changed their name to Superhuman. So they're telling us with Grammarly, you can be superhuman. You don't have to think of it at all. You just type without you ever having to ask. And I'm not sure that that's a real good place for human society to go to. And the entire educational system was intentionally entangled by these companies. So remember last year around March and April, just when semester schools are starting to take finals, OpenAI said ChatGPT Pro free for students for just 2 months. Just 2 months, right around finals. Then Perplexity came out with Comet, their agents, in September, and they said free for everybody with an EDU address. And then they tell us, well, everybody's using it. Your students are using it anyway, so you have no choice. You have to use it. You have to teach them how to use it. It's your job to teach them how to use it responsibly. It's your job to redesign the assessments to include these chatbots. So it just goes on and on and on. So if you think about it from this perspective, how as a student, as a 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, however old, do you stick to your goals? My goal is to learn. My goal is to develop skills and knowledge so that I can be successful in life. And yet these things are standing by, waiting and inviting me, enticing me to offload. I don't know how many of you have played with any of the agents. This is Perplexity Comet that came out last September, and it will just log into your LMS. It handled my Duo authentication. It will take the quiz for the student, and it will narrate the whole time about how awesome it's doing. It's perfect. It's great. I'm now doing this. I'm now clicking. I'm reasoning, all this stuff. And when it gets to the end, after it's taken the quiz for the student, oops, it will say, your quiz was submitted successfully. You scored 6.67 out of 7. You improved from your earlier preview. Your latest attempt and score have been submitted. It's not mine. It's not mine at all. They use this language to engage the user, the human, and to make them feel like they actually did something. But what they didn't do was learn, and what they didn't do is demonstrate their learning. So that's the situation our students are in right now. It is really difficult to maintain your personal integrity, even if you want to, in such circumstances. And I would say they're not just drawn to offload, they are enticed, they are invited. Think about ChatGPT. If you go in there and you just ask it to do one thing, and then it says, would you also like me to? So maybe a student goes in and says, hey, here's the prompt. Like, give me some ideas for starting this paper. Sure. Gives you some ideas. Would you also like me to write your opening paragraph? Would you like me to do some research? Would you like me to summarize the readings? Would you like me to do this? Right? Just constant invitations to offload. Now, to be clear, cognitive offloading doesn't have to mean cheating, right? It only means cheating under certain circumstances. For example, when it undermines learning objectives. So if I go, say I'm studying chemistry and English isn't my first language, and I did the labs and I learned everything, and I'm remembering it in my most comfortable language. And I'm trying to write that lab report, and I cannot remember how to say something in English. And I use ChatGPT or Google Translate or something to get a sentence or two into English. Probably okay, right? Because the key for the chemistry professors, do they understand chemistry? But if I am in my French language class and I write my paper in English and I give it to ChatGPT or Google Translate to put it in French for me, and then I hand it in to my professor and say, look, professor, here's my French essay, it's obviously cheating because it undermines the learning outcomes and it gives a dishonest impression of the student's knowledge and abilities, which doesn't just hurt that student, but it hurts the professor who now is not giving accurate feedback to the student. And if all the students did it, the professor might be like, hey, I can skip ahead. The students all get grammar. I'm gonna go 3 lessons, faster. And then all the students are suffering even more. So it's obviously not a good thing. And of course, it's cheating if it violates the rules. And hopefully the rules are connected back to the learning outcomes and they're not just rules for rules' sake. But even if they were, that would be cheating because it would be dishonest and getting an unfair advantage. So why do students do it? Well, as I've hinted at, chatbots are designed for it. They're designed to be addictive. They're designed to make life easier. They're designed for shortcuts. They're designed for engagement. And also because students offload to AI for the same reasons they cheat in any other ways. We have a whole chapter in the book on it, but there's personal and situational forces, and the 3 strongest personal ones are moral disengagement. I just don't see this as an ethical issue. I had a student say that to me this week. I just didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't think it was an ethical issue. There's nothing wrong with it. They're extrinsically motivated. I have to get the assignment done. I have to get the grade. I have to whatever. And low self-efficacy. I don't think I can do it, or I don't think I can do it to the level I want or in the time that I have. And then there's situational forces like course context. I didn't want to take this class. The university's making me take this stupid gen ed course. or the class is really big and I don't have a relationship with the professor, so I don't feel like I'm doing this to anybody. Peer norming, everybody else is doing it. This is a huge one. It was a huge one during the pandemic with all the remote tests, and now it's a huge one with AI. And then instructor influence. If the instructor doesn't talk about it, they don't tell students anything about it. Maybe the students think the instructor is using AI to phone it in, so they're going to use AI to phone it in. The perfect storm is really pure norming, extrinsic motivation, and low self-efficacy, but humans are complex, right? And one may be more prevalent at one time or another, or in one student more than another. But essentially, they cheat because they're human. If I asked any of you if you've ever been dishonest or disrespectful or irresponsible or untrustworthy or unfair, I'm assuming you would all say, yes, I have been. We're not perfect. We make ethical mistakes all the time. And so we got to expect that our students are going to make them as well. There are some things we can do to make cheating the exception and integrity the norm. And the first I would suggest is listening to our students, not just telling them, here's my AI policy, and then calling it the end, although that's a good start if you're not doing that, but really listening to them. Three different ways that you could think about doing this. I really think it's important for us to understand our students and every term because the AI tech keeps changing every term. Our students are different every term, so we can't ask this once and be done. Basically, asking them the same questions that I encourage students to ask themselves. Why am I thinking of using this? So if you're talking to students, why do you use these tools? When do you use them? How do you use them? Which ones do you use? And how do you decide if you should use them? You could even say, given the assessments that are in our class this quarter, which is A, B, and C, are there ways in which you think you could use these tools ethically? You collect that information from the students, and then you can analyze it and then decide, oh, actually, that's not a bad idea. I'm going to update my policy to allow that. Or you could say, oh, I totally disagree with this, and I better clear the record so students know. And then you give that information back to them. Thank you so much for this idea. I've updated my policy to reflect a really good idea I have. Here's what a lot of you said, and I disagree with that, and here's why. Usually helpful to connect it back to the learning outcomes. Another way to do this, I did this before AI came along, is co-create a class value statement. So on the left-hand side are the fundamental values of academic integrity. And then students can write out and talk to each other about what do we need to do to uphold these values? And what does the instructor or instructional team need to do to uphold these values? The nice thing about this is students would say the same thing that you would. You don't get ChatGPT to write your whole essay for you. You come to class prepared. And that way, the peer norming starts right from the beginning in a positive direction because you could tell them the exact same things and take 5 minutes to do it. Or you could take 20 minutes and have them have a discussion about it, and it's going to be much more powerful in terms of them influencing each other. The third way is much more time intensive, but could be interesting if you really want to think about course redesign or assessment redesign, is spending some time with your students to go over your assessments, or maybe you do this as a research project. Um, and this is using the AI assessment scale and having them actually look at every assessment in your course and going through the different ways that AI can be used and deciding whether it would be an ethical or unethical use in your particular class, given the learning outcomes and those particular assessments. But my main point, you could do this anyway, but my main point is rather than just talk at your students, listen to them, reflect back to them what they're saying that you agree with, and tell them why. When you would disagree with them, tell them why and connect it back to the learning outcomes. Okay, so that's the kind of the easy lift. The harder lift is emphasizing mastery. People keep asking me, like, how do we ready our students for the AI world? Do we need to teach them all AI literacy? Do we need to all teach them AI skills? And I say, absolutely. Students at some point during their 4 years or whatever with us should be learning how AI works, how Gen AI works, when is it good to use it, and learn how to use it ethically and responsibly. But not every teacher needs to teach that. What I think our students need And we'll need, regardless of how the tech changes in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now, is durable human skills. These are usually within our hidden curriculum, right? Like we say, students learn how to collaborate with others because we throw them into groups. Not that we actually teach them how to work in groups, but that we just say you must work in groups. Students learn to communicate because we've had them write 5 paragraph essays for 4 years. What we really need to do is like double down on these and unhide that hidden curriculum. So one activity we do with our students is we give them a pretty typical assignment on that left side, like a pretty typical writing assignment, and we ask them to go through it and analyze according to this particular wheel what durable human skills they might be developing. The idea here is that every assignment you get in school, you're not going to love. Every class that you take, you're not going to love. Welcome to the real world. There's a lot of things that I have to do on my job that I don't love doing, and I and I have to do them anyways, right? And so for students is helping them think, what durable skills am I going to develop if I actually do this rather than offload it? I had great conversations with students. I even just asked them, like, what durable human skills are you developing when you're taking an exam? Because you're never going to have to take exams, in your 30s, 40s, 50s. And they're like, well, learning to work under pressure, managing my anxiety, time management. I got to figure out how many questions there are, how long it's going to take me, how much time I have, persistence through something that's very difficult. They can actually name these things, but having the conversation with them helps reinforce that these are valuable things to care about. And this is their time to develop them. Other ways we can inspire learning through mastery. Our whole book's on this basically. So I'm not going to go over all of these in detail, but I want to pick up on a couple of things, maybe a low-hanging one, like one that's pretty easy to do, and something that's more challenging. So rethinking and aligning learning outcomes. So we often have learning outcomes on the first page of the syllabus, and then maybe we don't ever talk about them again. So one thing we can do is make sure that our assessments are aligned to those learning outcomes and we are explicit with our students about that. Simple way I did that is page in my syllabus, where you talk about every week we're going to be doing this activity or these readings are due. I would just have an extra column that had the learning outcome number that it was attached back to. And I would talk about it again when I was giving them the assignment or on the assignment prompt. And of course, we might also have to rethink learning outcomes. Are they still relevant in the age of AI? Can I change them? If I can change them, am I dropping it? Am I adding a different one? Am I moving it up Bloom's taxonomy? Whatever. So that's a pretty low-hanging fruit choice. Harder ones are emphasizing process over product. So we've often relied on the product as an artifact of learning, and it has particularly in the 21st century with the internet and now Gen AI, lost its accuracy in being a measure of learning. So for example, to go back to chemistry, the Chem Lab report. So students spend hours in a lab every week learning. And then the way we grade them is they write up a, boring report that looks like a journal article, even though the majority of our students are never going to write a journal article again in a day in their life. And even though the methods are going to be the same for every student, even though the results are going to be very similar for every student. So could we do something else in that circumstance? Now, all of our suggestions in the book are a menu of options because we don't know your situational context. We don't know how big your class is, the level of your students, if you have any teaching support, all those kind of things. So these are all just suggestions, but could I spend my time observing students do a lab skill instead of sitting there grading their lab report at home by myself, right? Later. Maybe they don't have to demonstrate every skill. Maybe I randomly, Jason, I want you to demonstrate this skill. Marianne, I want you to demonstrate this skill. Kelly, I want you to demonstrate that skill. So that's a little bit harder to do, hard to do in writing. We're talking about using Google Docs version history to try and do that. Again, there's technological solutions coming at us about this, but I do really think we need to figure this out. One way we can emphasize process of our product is flipping the classroom, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So everything about emphasizing mastery is about emphasizing intrinsic motivation for learning. Human beings love to learn. At least we start off that way. Our colleague Susan Bloom, who wrote Schoolishness, would say that our school system and structures have kind of beaten that love of learning out of many of us. But the truth is humans love to learn. We're curious. One of the earliest words we speak, especially as we become toddlers, is why. Why? Why? Don't touch the stove. Why? Clean up your toys. Why? Right? Don't hit your brother. Why? So this is really a thing. We want to understand life. We want to understand the world. And so all of these emphasizing mastery is about inspiring learning versus a performance orientation, which really focuses students on the grade. But in an AI world, inspiring learning will only take us so far. We really do need to rethink learning validation. And this is the tough one for a lot of folks. University of Sydney came out with this two-lane approach that is, I think, a good starting point for making some movement here. And they basically said we can't secure every assessment. And secure means it's supervised. Supervised means I know it's the student completing the assessment and I know what aids, if any, they're using. That is very resource intensive. So we can't secure all assessments, which means and those are the summative assessments, right? We're validating learning, which means we're going to have some open assessments, which are formative for learning to help facilitate student learning. And on those, we cannot stop students from using AI, Gen AI, because they're unsupervised. Even if we give them all the guidance in the world, they're still going to use it in ways they're not supposed to. So University of Sydney has actually said you may not ban AI on these open assessments. Because if you do, you're going to spend all your time trying to detect if a student used it rather than worrying about validating learning. And we want you to worry about validating learning. So for open assessments, we say, okay, so this assessment's unsupervised. Here's how I think you can best learn. I think you should do A, B, and C, and I think you should avoid using AI in these three ways. I also want you to disclose if and how you used Gen AI on these. And I might sit down and talk with you about it to make sure that you're actually doing yourself service in trying to learn the material. But you know what? You do you. I'm not going to try and control your learning. If you think you can learn better from AI or YouTube, you do that. But here's the ways after 30 years of teaching that students, it shows that students best learn through these methods. And there's going to be some secure assessments to validate whether your basically methods of learning were successful. Secure assessments can look like all sorts of things. Again, the only criteria is it's the student, the enrolled student completing the assessment, and you know what aids, if any, they're using. Western Sydney University adapted the two-lane approach in this way. They put it into 4 quadrants. They're talking about inspiring learning, which is the top row, and assuring learning, which would be in the bottom row, but some are more inspiring and more assuring than others. So this unsupervised lane is in the left, the supervised lane is in the right. So top left quadrant, these are unsupervised assessments. A lot of folks talk about if we just make meaningful, authentic assessments, students will stop cheating. That is not true. But it is true that could raise their intrinsic motivation to do them. So, for example, I teach ethics. I don't give students cases from Harvard Business Review. I have them pick an ethical dilemma they're currently facing and write about that. It's more authentic, it's more meaningful, it gives them some choice and control. We want to stay away from this bottom left-hand quadrant because it neither inspires learning nor assures or, in my words, validate learning. Those online discussion boards, for example. We'd love to live in the top right quadrant, but there are times when we have to be in the bottom right quadrant, which doesn't necessarily inspire learning in the moment because that's not what it's about. It's about validating learning. And so the way we're doing that here in the University of California is computer-based assessment centers. This is particularly good for foundational courses. So think any discipline that has some foundational knowledge that you need to learn in order to be able to offload to AI later, just like we still teach kids basic arithmetic, even though there's calculators, really good for students. We know who they are. We check their IDs. They have no aids on them except what's allowed. And because of the platform we use, faculty can schedule in frequent mastery-based assessments because they're not taking up class time. And we know that frequent mastery-based assessments, mastery-based means they have an opportunity to retake if they don't do well. Um, we know that those types of assessments reduce equity gaps, particularly in STEM fields. When we want to live in this top right quadrant. This is the flipped, active, engaged classroom where students, it's the students doing the work because they're doing the work in class, right? Out of class, they're just doing the readings and doing all the prep for class, the learning. And then they come to class and they apply that learning to solve problems. So it could be problem-based learning, it could be team-based learning, it could be POGIL, whatever, it could be peer instruction. But it allows us to both assure and celebrate their learning as a community with human-to-human interactions. So how do you decide which assessments to open up and which to secure? Well, if Gen AI, open it up. If Gen AI might amplify their learning or at least not undermine the expected course learning outcomes. And of course, when the assessments are for rather than of learning, again, you can give students guidance and say, this is how I think you can best learn by completing these problem sets. But you do you. If you think you can learn by copying out of the instructor manual or getting ChatGPT to do it, go for it. But you're going to secure it in order to validate their learning. So if Gen AI use would inhibit your ability to validate their learning, or if they need these skills in order to, and knowledge to be able to offload to AI later. And maybe we need these to confirm their readiness to graduate, just like at the doctoral level, right? I have to do that final dissertation defense to prove I'm ready to go. My point is we have agency, right? We hear a lot of things like the genie's out of the bottle, the train's off the tracks. But this rhetoric that implies we have no choice or we have no agency to make different decisions is not helpful. So we have agency. And I'm just going to sum up with a slide so we have lots of time for discussion. And I do want to talk about the institution as well. So as an instructor, we have agency to talk with our students and listen to them. We have our agency to determine what assessments should be open versus secure. We have agency to try and move towards mastery-oriented redesign. Maybe not this term, but maybe next year. Maybe it's one class next year and then a second class the year after that, and then your third class you teach the year after that. We have agency to remind ourselves that students are human, then they need help to stay focused on their goals. And it's not, when you're securing assessment, it's not because you don't trust them, it's because you trust them to be human. And you care about them enough to give them some time. We've had students say to me, thank God for the Triton Testing Center, our testing center, because it gives me 45 minutes of device-free, distraction-free environment to just prove what I know, what I can do. These are my words, not theirs, but that's essentially what they're saying, right? Because they're so tired of trying to do something and their TikToks binging and their Instagrams binging and their parents are texting them and everything. There's just so much coming at them. And we can give them an environment where nothing is coming at them except the questions on the assessment. As an institution, we should not put this on the shoulders of individual faculty alone. We must have clear standardized use policies for our students and our faculty and our staff. I think we all should be investing in computer-based assessment centers. I do believe faculty should be given time, pay, and support to redesign their courses. They should not be expected to rebuild the plane while they're flying it. I think the institution or maybe departments need to figure out how to intentionally scaffold in AI use. This should, again, not be on every individual instructor. So the biology department should figure out what are our foundational classes. Let's secure most of the assessments in those foundational courses. Then let's figure out what are biologists using? How are biologists out in the field using Gen AI? Or how is the medicine, the health field using AI? And then help students learn and apply that. Because again, no sense teaching them anything particular in first year about how AI is being used in the field, because it'll be totally different by the time our kids get to fourth year. So yes, teaching them about AI literacy, making sure they understand it and how it works, but scaffolding it in after they've got that foundational knowledge, be like, okay, now that you have this knowledge, let's play with these tools. And institutions, we do need to monitor student well-being. There are multiple harms. I have talked to many students who say they are addicted. I was talking with an exchange student because her parents are in a very different time zone. She started using ChatGPT for everything. She said, I almost developed an eating disorder because I was trying to get it to help me figure out what to eat because this is a different country and with different food choices. And it kept telling me I was taking in too many calories. I ask it what to wear. I use it for all my homework. And then there's also been known suicides not that have been done with the assistance of companion AI and ChatGPT. Especially if we're going to give them these tools, we better make sure that they're not contributing to unhealthy mental and physical outcomes. So that's it for my talking at you to use my own advice. Now it's time for me to listen and hear some questions and engage in discussion with you. Let me stop sharing my screen if I can find my controls, or if Lindsay, you can turn it off for me because my controls are now hidden. There, finally was able to move everything.
Okay.
Stop share. Good.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
I have a question for you, Tricia.
Sure.
Uh, you made a really good point that intrinsic motivation is especially important. And I'm curious because I've really devoted a lot of my energy to trying to convert what I call students to learners, to folks that are really um, eager to master and not
Mm.
just kind of perform and have a transactional relationship with their college experience. And I'm curious if you've seen an effort that's really been helpful for that, that has been scalable, because it seems to be a very difficult thing. We spend a lot of time up front with our brand new students, getting them kind of excited about lots of things, but I'm not sure we really get it to focus on the learning aspect and how critical that aspect is.
We were just talking about this last night at the faculty club happy hour about how we should get rid of traditional orientation, which is so much information piled on the students in like, what, 2, 3 days. And it's mostly logistical. Where do I sleep? Where do I eat? How do I register for classes? That kind of thing. And we've had first year seminars that weren't required but were optional, but there was no kind of requirement of them. They were, hey, professor, you want to teach about some, you know, random thing that you're interested in, you study, then you can do it in a first year seminar, which isn't, again, not really directed at what our students need. So we were just talking about maybe we need to turn orientation into a required full quarter, for us quarter length term, and include AI literacy and include executive functioning skills. I think I think students are excited to learn when they get here, as you point out. I think a lot of them, even our students, our average GPA of our entering freshmen is 4.2. They're remedial in math, 33% of them, and a lot of them are remedial in reading. And when I meet with them, now I'm meeting with a special population, of course, they don't have basic organizational skills. And so even if I'm motivated to learn, if I'm spending most of my time trying to find what my Google Doc for my particular essay I started yesterday because I didn't name it and I don't have a course folder for it, I'm going to get really frustrated before I even start to think about my learning, right? So I think that's really important. And then that the folk that those are some skills they need. And then the learning, the investment in learning or the excitement of learning can't just be solidified right in my first term because I'm here for 4 years. And I'm going to take a lot of classes that I don't want to take and a lot of professors I don't like. Um, and so re we got to figure out how to reinvigorate that, I think, not just as individual instructors, but as institutions throughout their entire time with us. And I think it's the doubling down on durable human skills. The students seem to get that. And they want to know that we get it and that we've intentionally designed that in.
I agree strongly with you, Tricia. I think it's the skills part. I
Yes.
also think that it's affected by the fact that some of the first classes they have are very large classes
Mm,
where it's very difficult for a faculty member to
yeah.
focus on skills. I think
What,
that
what's,
the, go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry,
No,
go ahead.
what's the largest class size there?
Well, I'd say there's some that are in the over 500.
Yeah.
300, 400 is not uncommon in your
Yeah.
first year.
Same as us. Yeah. So a couple of things for the institution to think about, and I know there's financial reasons and logistical reasons and all sorts of reasons why we've done that. Most of them, I don't think any of them were pedagogical reasons why we have such large classes. And we do too, right? And so if we think about we've already seen before AI came along a lot of colleges and universities closing across the nation. And some of us, probably you guys too, just getting bigger and bigger, which means we're going to have bigger and bigger classes. But yet, in an AI-enabled world, what added value do we have? It's not in the delivery of knowledge and content. It's in facilitating human-to-human experiences, learning experiences, right? We can't do that in 3, 4, 5, 600 classes as easy. We can do some peer instruction and maybe there's a discussion, some smaller discussion sections. But really, what is the 500 lecture for if we're not in the business of delivering content anymore? So I really do think we need, if we want to survive this as institutions, I think we really do need to rethink that. And how can we deliver human to human learning experiences? It's probably not at scale, but when I use the word at scale, I mean with the population we have, how can we still do that? Um, and I've done flipped classroom up to 125. And I could have done it with 180, which was like the size of the classroom, no problem. I was at this keynote I gave on Saturday with our community college district. She said she's done a flipped engaged classroom with, I think she said 250, 300 students. So there are possibilities there. It's much harder. And devices get in the way usually of those things because all the kids get in class and they flip up their laptops open. And if I don't know, I just feel like we got to figure this out because they don't need to come to our physical campuses to get on their laptops.
Just a real quick question, Tris. It's Jeff Trombley. Very interesting presentation. I've read your book. It's very useful to me. We at the university are moving more from a policy standpoint toward online learning. There's a major investment going on there. Any thoughts on how to approach that boogeyman from an ethical standpoint? And so, appreciate it.
Question for you, Jeff. Online synchronous, online asynchronous, both?
Both. We have flavors of each.
Okay. So the first thing I think we need to do when we're thinking through this is decouple our language, the modality of learning from the modality of assessment. Online learning is a great thing. People can learn 24/7. My husband is constantly learning from YouTube how to fix his own bike, his own mountain bike, right? Great. We're not in the business of controlling how people learn anymore. We are in the business of giving structure and guidance, access to facilities like labs or internships or clinical rotations. We are in the business of human to human learning experiences. I think we need to be careful, therefore, about how much online, especially asynchronous, we do, because I think in maybe 5 years or less, they don't need us for that. There'll be a competitor that comes along that does it better than we do it. And I just don't know that that's the way we're going to stay relevant in the future. Two, in terms of modality of assessment, asynchronous, remote unsecure assessments cannot be the basis of people getting degrees. And so if we tell students, this is an online asynchronous program, but we've built in multiple times where you have to be with other humans. Now, we could be really creative about this. So we say we want online asynchronous because we have a lot of students with jobs, they have families. Okay, so they're out there experiencing things, right? They're doing human to human experiences with other people, just not with us. So how do we leverage that? So if it is an online asynchronous program and I'm a working mother, how do I gear my classes or my, like, what is she bringing from her experience, her day-to-day life into the classroom? How is she learning that? Are we connecting these things? I think we have to be a lot more creative. I come from a cooperative education background, the University of Guelph, and we just don't do enough of that kind of thing. And I think we're going to have to be much more creative, especially if you think about AI taking the jobs that most of our new grads used to get, those entry jobs. We're going to have to provide them that entry level experience while they're with us. And so I think there could be ways to do this. I always worry when I hear about an online asynchronous nursing program. Unless unless there's some synchronous points where they're in a setting with other humans and they are treating patients. Or, okay, maybe we can start with AI simulations of me having a conversation with a patient, but I've got to eventually move to having it with a real human, maybe before my clinical rotations. I don't know if we want to wait until I'm out there with other nurses trying to demonstrate my skills. But long answer to your very important question. Separate the modality of learning from the modality of assessment. Know that if we're going to have an online asynchronous program, we have to feature in some synchronous assessment time. I don't know about your school, but I know lots of schools prohibit faculty from requiring synchronous meetings in an asynchronous class, even if they say, this is the week, book a day and time that's convenient for you. And this is where I think we're privileging access over integrity and learning. In what world are we preparing our students for? In what world can a person say, no, boss, I'm not going to meet with you synchronously. Sorry, just email me. I'll get back to you when I can.
Mm-hmm.
That is that is overemphasizing access to the point where I think it's actually detrimental to our students because they're not really having the ability to get their learning validated, to know if they're on track, to know if they're actually developing knowledge and skills, or whether they're just phoning it in and they're going to regret it later. But I'm not passionate about this at all. And my master's was in rural extension studies, right? So I have a bit of knowledge about the history of correspondence education and distance education, and I get where it's coming from. And I just don't know that that's a 2020. I think I don't know that that's what we need to be doing in 2026. I think we can do better to marry access, integrity, and learning together. We're
Thank you.
smart enough.
Thanks.
And Bob, I think you're right. I think it depends, though, on the age of the students. I think it depends on how much else they got going on in their lives. I think that most students hate collaborative group work from the sheer point of having to, the logistical parts of it, right? Having to coordinate, having to figure things out, trusting one another. And so that's pretty hard when you've never maybe even met the person. It's hard to feel like you're in a room with other humans when everything is asynchronous. We've seen this in the world of work, right? We've seen this in all sorts, like we've seen this with dementia. How the best preventative mechanism for dementia is social interactions.
Well, looks like I can comment again if you don't
Yeah.
mind. I was going to say I've had students in my asynchronous classes, and I suspect others have too, that have shared that they had more sense of engagement and community in that class than in many of their on campus. In fact, this fall I had some students that told me that they would talk about the class that they were in with me in their class on campus, and I think the reason for that is I'm very active in the discussions. I point out clarifications, issues, because what I find is without being immersed in your discussions, immersed in your interactions with others, you basically make learning worse. You end up promoting lots of misconceptions because they don't know a lot
Yeah.
of things and they're saying a lot of things. And even if we just briefly respond, and that's something AI can help with, of course,
Yeah.
but I have not found that it's been scalable for me. It's made me able to be a much better learning facilitator
Yeah.
because there's lots of things that AI can help me think through and in a way kind of as an administrative assistant or like I like to
Yeah.
think of an intern help me,
Yeah.
but it does not work like magic. I
No.
think that's where you're right. Like you're not going to just be able to publish an asynchronous course that's the typical one, the kind you see
Yes.
on Coursera,
Yes.
and have it actually produce learning. That's to me a complete farce.
Yeah, Bob, really good point. So I would say it's both a compliment to you when they say they're more engaged in your class than some of their in-person classes, and a good mirror for our in-person. In-person doesn't mean engaging. We have a lot to learn from the research on online learning, right? We talk about it in our book, social presence, cognitive presence, it's not just about physically present. If I show up to my in-person lecture and I talk like this, and I just really don't care about the students and I don't make eye contact, that's not engaging, right? So thank you for reminding us that synchronous in-person doesn't mean automatically engaging. We both require an intense amount of effort. The other thing I would say is give a shout out to my colleague, Flower Darby, who recently just published in the same series as our book, The Joyful Online Teacher. And for those of you that do teach online and you'd like some inspiration, Flower's your girl. Julie.
Yes, hi, thanks. I have a question about scalability. So, when we're trying to focus more on process rather than product,
Yeah.
it seems some of the recommendations double, revise and resubmit, you're going to double the manual grading load when you have hundreds and hundreds of students.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And integrating AI, you have extra materials to review, AI prompts, AI reflection, AI use decisions. So how do you continue to make it scalable? And that's in the context of when you redesign and you already have now more low stake iterative assignments, there's actually increasing the workload as well, even if some
Yeah.
are auto graded or completion based. So what is your best insight for those of us who are teaching large classes, online and in person, but that we can be scalable and
Yeah.
follow these best practices?
So So with the caveat that I don't think we should keep scaling our classes bigger and bigger. I just want to keep manifesting that out into the universe. So with that caveat, you are currently dealing with that, so I get it. I do think I would love that one of the points of our computer-based assessment center is getting faculty out of the business of administering tests. I think it's a waste of your time to print tests, collate them, walk to class, distribute them, watch your students for however long it takes, collect the exams, get them scanned back in, get them graded. Um, I think that that's so send them to us, right? Like send them to an computer-based assessment center, especially if it's a foundational class, and you use your class time to maybe do those conversations with students to follow up. So if they did do an essay and you're reading the essay and you're like, huh, this seems weird. If you're reading it and everything seems fine, you don't have to go to all those AI disclosures or any of the process stuff, right? So sometimes I was looking up to share with you Chris Ostro, great University of Colorado Boulder professor who has what he calls the mosaic approach. And so he really only goes to those disclosures and those chat histories when he's seeing something. Either he's unable to validate the student learning because something's popping up or something's really off. Like, why is the student talking about this author that we didn't talk about or this made up person that doesn't exist? And then he'll go to it and then he'll use that for the conversation. But if you weren't having to stand there and do all the test administration stuff, then you'd have more time. And so I think that's one way to do some scaling is, and to Bob's point, what can we offload to AI in terms of the administrative work? Um, so that's just one idea. I'm trying to find Chris's share drive. I know he makes it public, and so I'll drop the link in the chat. Yeah, found it. So I don't know if that really helps that much because you probably don't have a computer-based assessment center yet. But one of the things about agency is we not only have agency as individual instructors, but we have it as collective. And I think we often forget that. I think, there's a lot of people working really hard right now in democracy to remind us that we have agency as a population. And I think we need to remind ourselves that as employees as well, that we have agency to speak up and out and not just keep our problems to ourselves and trying to figure out a particular strategy for our class, but to say, this isn't working and here's why. And this would be better for our students if we did X, Y, and Z. So it's my little shout out for collective agency as well. I always say, Julie, just to give one caveat, I guess, is I often say I can only help faculty so far because I don't even know what you teach. I don't teach what you teach. I have no disciplinary expertise in that. I don't know your students. And so that's why our book is about a menu of options. And then one other thing the institutions could do, and I don't know, Jason, if you're already doing this, but having, making sure in each disciplinary area, there's one or two faculty who are really thinking about this stuff and then they can help because history faculty are better able to help other history faculty and so on, right? So I think that's super important as well.
I don't want to interrupt this fantastic conversation, but I
sure.
just want to briefly interject that since we have reached 1 o'clock, for those of you who are have questions or welcome to chat or want to, continue the conversation, we will be happy to hang out for a little bit longer. But please do not feel obligated to stay. And I just wanted to, while everyone is here, give Tricia a huge thank you for her work and her time with us today. This has been so fantastic. So thank you, Tricia, for being here. Like I
Thanks
said,
everyone for caring about students, caring about teaching and learning. We can do this. We just have to help each other and band together and speak up.